Part 1. The Discovery. The December wind cut through downtown like a knife. Most people hurried past the old brick building that housed the city shelter, their heads down, collars pulled high. But David Rodriguez had learned long ago to notice the spaces between buildings, the shadowy corners where hope went to hide. He had been working late again. At 34, David had spent the last 8 years as a social worker, and overtime had become his normal routine. The community center where he worked stayed open until 10 on weeknights, offering dinner and a warm place for anyone who needed it. Tonight, like most nights, he was the last one to leave. As David locked the front door and pulled his jacket tighter, something caught his eye. Behind the dumpster in the narrow alley beside the building, he saw movement. In his line of work, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something told him to investigate. What he found broke his heart. A young woman sat curled against the cold brick wall, her knees pulled to her chest. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands around her face, and her thin jacket was no match for the bitter December night. In her hands, she clutched what looked like a torn photograph and a small backpack that seemed to contain everything she owned. David approached slowly, the way you might approach a frightened animal. He had seen this look before, the wide eyes of someone who had been hurt too many times, who expected the worst from every stranger. "Hey there," he said softly, stopping a few feet away. "I'm David. I work at the community center. Are you okay?" The woman looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than her years. She couldn't have been more than 28, but there was a weariness in her expression that spoke of struggles beyond her age. She didn't answer right away, just studied his face as if trying to decide whether he was safe. "I'm not going to hurt you," David said, crouching down to her level. "It's really cold out here. Have you eaten today?" Still, she said nothing, but David noticed how she shivered despite trying to hide it. Without thinking twice, he shrugged off his winter coat, a thick, warm jacket his sister had given him for Christmas the year before. "Here," he said, holding it out to her. "Take this. You need it more than I do." The woman stared at the coat as if it were some kind of trick. In her experience, nothing good came without a price. But the cold was winning the battle against her pride, and slowly she reached out and took it. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, probably from the cold and from not speaking much lately. "What's your name?" David asked gently. She hesitated for a long moment. "Luna," she finally said. "Luna Martinez." Luna. That's a beautiful name. David smiled, and for the first time, Luna's expression softened just a little. "Luna, when was the last time you had a hot meal?" She looked down at her hands. "I don't remember." David's heart ached. He had seen hunger before, but it never got easier. "The shelter serves breakfast at 7 in the morning, but I know a place that's still open. Would you let me buy you something to eat?" Luna's eyes widened with suspicion. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "Because you're human and you're hungry and I can help." David's answer was simple and honest. No strings attached, just food. There was something in his voice that made Luna believe him. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not with pity or disgust, but with genuine concern. Or maybe it was just that she was too tired and cold to keep fighting. "Okay," she said quietly. The diner David chose was small and warm, the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the waitress called everyone honey. Luna ordered soup and a sandwich, eating slowly as if she couldn't quite believe the food was real. David ordered coffee and watched her eat, noticing how she tried to make each bite last. "Can I ask what happened?" David said after a while. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." Luna set down her spoon and looked out the window at the dark street. "I used to have an apartment, a job. I worked at Jefferson Elementary School as a teaching assistant. I loved those kids," her voice grew soft with memory. "But the school had budget cuts. They had to let some people go, and I was one of them." She picked up the torn photograph she had been holding earlier. David could see it was a picture of her with a group of children, all of them smiling. "I couldn't find another job fast enough. Rent was due, then late fees piled up. My landlord gave me 30 days, then eviction papers." Luna's voice was matter-of-fact, but David could hear the pain underneath. "I called my family, but..." She shrugged. "Let's just say they made it clear I was on my own." David felt anger rise in his chest. Not at Luna, but at a system that could let someone fall so far so fast. "How long have you been on the streets?" 3 weeks. Luna looked down at her hands. I tried the shelters, but they fill up fast. I've been staying wherever I can. Park benches, doorways, behind buildings like where you found me. What about friends? Other teachers from the school? Luna shook her head. I was too embarrassed to tell anyone what was happening. By the time I realized how bad things were getting, it felt too late to ask for help. They sat in silence for a moment. David understood that kind of pride, the kind that could keep you from reaching out even when you were drowning. He had seen it destroy good people. Luna, he said finally, I want you to know that what happened to you isn't your fault. Sometimes life just hits hard and it's not because you did anything wrong. She looked up at him with surprise. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to her with such kindness. I work with people in situations like yours every day, David continued. And I know it might be hard to believe right now, but things can get better. It takes time and it takes help, but it's possible. Luna wanted to believe him, but hope was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. You don't understand, she said. I have nothing. No money, no references, no address to put on job applications. Who's going to hire someone like me? Someone who sees your worth, David replied. Someone who understands that your value as a person isn't determined by your current circumstances. As they prepared to leave the diner, David wrote his phone number on a napkin. I know you don't have any reason to trust me yet, he said. But if you need help, any kind of help, please call me, or come by the community center. We're open every day. Luna took the napkin and stared at it. Why are you doing this? David thought about his answer carefully. Because someone did it for me once when I needed it most. And because I believe that's what people should do for each other. Outside the diner, the December wind was still bitter cold. David walked Luna back toward the shelter area, hoping she might find a spot inside for the night. As they parted ways, she was still wearing his coat. David, she called out as he started to walk away. He turned back. Thank you, she said, for seeing me, for treating me like I matter. You do matter, Luna, he said. Don't ever forget that. As David walked home through the empty streets, he couldn't stop thinking about the young woman with the sad eyes and the torn photograph. Something told him this was just the beginning of their story. Part 2. Building Trust. 3 days passed before David saw Luna again. He had driven by the alley behind the community center twice each day, hoping to find her there, but the space remained empty except for scattered newspapers and broken glass. On Wednesday evening, while serving dinner at the downtown soup kitchen where he volunteered twice a week, David spotted a familiar figure in the long line of people waiting for food. Luna stood near the back, still wearing his winter coat, her eyes scanning the room nervously as if looking for exits. When she reached the serving counter, their eyes met. David was ladling soup into bowls, and he gave her an extra portion along with 2 dinner rolls instead of 1. How are you holding up? He asked quietly. I'm okay, Luna replied, but David could see the exhaustion in her face. 3 more nights on the streets had taken their toll. After the dinner service ended and the kitchen was cleaned, David found Luna sitting alone at a corner table, slowly eating her meal. He approached with a cup of coffee and gestured to the empty chair across from her. Mind if I sit? She nodded and David sat down. For a few minutes they didn't speak. Luna seemed more comfortable with silence than with conversation, and David had learned not to push too hard too fast. I kept your coat, Luna said finally, looking down at the jacket she wore. I hoped you would, David replied. It looks better on you anyway. A tiny smile flickered across Luna's face, the first real smile David had seen from her. It transformed her entire appearance, making her look younger and reminding him that underneath all the hardship was someone who had once laughed easily. Over the following weeks, David began seeing Luna regularly. Not every day, but often enough to track how she was doing. Sometimes she was at the soup kitchen, sometimes at the women's shelter when they had space, and sometimes at the public library during the day. The library visits intrigued David. When he mentioned this during one of their brief conversations, Luna's cheeks flushed pink. I used to love reading, she admitted, before everything fell apart. The library is warm and quiet, and nobody bothers you if you're clean and don't cause trouble. What do you like to read? Everything, but especially books about teaching, about helping kids learn. Luna's voice grew wistful. I always dreamed of having my own classroom someday. I was actually taking night classes to get my teaching degree before I lost my job. David felt his heart break a little more. Here was someone with dreams, with goals, with so much to offer, and circumstances had stolen it all away. "How close were you to finishing?" he asked. "I had 1 semester left." Luna stirred her soup absently. "But I couldn't pay tuition anymore. And even if I could, you need an address to register for classes. You need stability." David made a mental note. There might be options. Programs for people in transition, financial aid, scholarship opportunities. But he knew better than to overwhelm Luna with possibilities she wasn't ready to hear about yet. Instead, he asked about her family. The pain that crossed Luna's face told him everything he needed to know before she even spoke. "My parents died when I was 22, she said quietly. Car accident on I-95 during a thunderstorm. They were coming home from my college graduation." David's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "Luna, I'm so sorry. They had life insurance, but it barely covered the funeral costs. And they had debts I didn't know about. Credit cards, a second mortgage on the house." Luna's voice was steady, but David could hear the old pain underneath. "I had to sell everything just to pay what they owed." "What about other family? Siblings, aunts, uncles?" Luna's laugh was bitter. "My dad's brother lives in Phoenix. When I called him after I got evicted, he told me I should have been more responsible with money. Said his family couldn't afford to support someone who couldn't support herself." The cruelty of it made David's hands clench into fists under the table. He had seen this too many times. People who were 1 paycheck away from disaster themselves, unable or unwilling to help family members who had already fallen. "That must have been devastating," David said. "It was the last time I'll ever ask anyone for help," Luna replied firmly. "Except you're here talking to me," David pointed out gently. Luna looked up at him, surprised by her own contradiction. "You're different," she said after a moment. "You don't make me feel like I'm broken." Over the next month, their conversations grew longer and more comfortable. David learned that Luna had been an honor student in college, that she spoke 3 languages, that she had once volunteered at a literacy program for adults. Luna learned that David had grown up in foster care, that he had worked his way through college while living in his car for part of his senior year, that he understood exactly what it felt like to have nowhere to turn. "Is that why you do this work?" Luna asked one evening as they walked together from the soup kitchen to the bus stop, where she would catch a ride to whichever shelter had space that night. "Partly," David admitted. "When I was 19, I was living in my car and trying to finish high school. A social worker named Mrs. Patterson found me sleeping in the school parking lot. Instead of reporting me to authorities, she helped me find a program for homeless students. She saved my life. What happened to her? She retired a few years ago. I still send her Christmas cards." David smiled at the memory. "She always told me that help isn't really help unless you pass it forward." Luna walked quietly for a while, processing this. "How do you know I'm worth helping?" she asked. "How do you know I'm not just going to disappoint you?" David stopped walking and turned to face her. "Luna, worth isn't something you earn. It's something you have just by being human. And besides," he added with a smile, "you've already shown me who you are." "How?" "The way you talk about those kids you worked with. The way you still carry their picture even though you lost everything else. The way you say thank you even when you're hungry and scared. The way you haven't given up even when giving up would be easier." Luna felt something she hadn't felt in months, a tiny spark of pride in herself. It was so small she almost didn't recognize it, but it was there. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, David began introducing Luna to other resources. Not pushing, just mentioning options. There was a job training program at the community college. There were temporary employment agencies that specialized in helping people get back on their feet. There was a transitional housing program for women that provided not just shelter, but support services. "I'm not ready," Luna would say each time he brought up these possibilities. "I know," David would reply. "I'm not trying to rush you. I just want you to know the options exist when you are ready." The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday in March. David found Luna at the library, sitting at a computer terminal, staring at a job application website with tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "I've been trying to fill out applications," Luna said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "But every single one asks for an address, a phone number, references. I have none of those things. I keep starting over and getting nowhere." David looked at the screen, then at Luna's frustrated face. "What if we worked on this together?" he suggested. What if we figured out solutions to each of these problems one at a time? Luna looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. You would do that? Luna, I would do that and more, David said honestly. The question is, are you ready to let me help you? For the first time since her world had collapsed, Luna felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone. Maybe this man with the kind eyes and gentle voice really could help her find her way back to the life she had lost. Yes, she whispered. I think I'm ready to try. Outside the library windows, the March rain was washing away the last traces of winter, and something new was beginning to grow. Part 3. A Glimmer of Hope. The first breakthrough came 2 weeks after Luna agreed to let David help her. Mrs. Chen, the head librarian at the downtown branch, had noticed Luna spending her days there, and had quietly observed her helping other patrons find books and navigate the computer system. There's something special about that young woman, Mrs. Chen told David when he stopped by the library during his lunch break. She helped an elderly man figure out how to use email to contact his grandson yesterday. She was so patient and kind with him. David wasn't surprised. He had watched Luna interact with people over the past few months, and despite her own struggles, she always treated others with dignity and respect. She used to work with children, David explained. She's a natural teacher. Mrs. Chen nodded thoughtfully. We have a part-time position opening up next month. Library assistant 20 hours a week. It's not much money, but it comes with benefits and it's honest work. Do you think she might be interested? David's heart jumped. Would you consider interviewing her? If she's interested, have her come see me, Mrs. Chen said. But David, you know I'll have to ask about her living situation. We need a reliable address for employment records. This was the challenge David had been expecting. Luna was currently staying at different shelters each night depending on availability. Some nights, when all the shelters were full, she still slept outside. It wasn't the stable foundation someone needed to hold down a job. That evening, David met Luna at their usual spot, a small cafe near the community center that stayed open late and didn't mind if customers lingered. Over a single cup of coffee for hours. I have some good news, he told her as she sat down across from him, still wearing his winter coat even though spring was warming the air. Luna raised an eyebrow. Good news had been rare in her life lately. Mrs. Chen at the library wants to interview you for a part-time position. Luna's eyes widened. Really, she wants to interview me? She's been watching how you help people there. She's impressed. David leaned forward. Luna, this could be exactly what you need to get back on your feet. For a moment, Luna's face lit up with genuine excitement. Then reality set in and her expression fell. I can't take a job, she said quietly. I don't have an address. I don't have clean clothes for an interview. I don't even have a phone number where they can reach me. What if we solved those problems? David asked. What if I told you there was a way? Luna looked at him skeptically. Over the months they had known each other, David had never made promises he couldn't keep, but this seemed impossible. The transitional housing program I told you about, David continued. They have an opening. It's a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it's yours for up to 18 months while you get back on your feet. You'd pay what you can afford based on your income. David, I don't have any income. Not yet, but if you get the library job, you will. And the housing program is designed for exactly this situation. People who are ready to work, but need a stable place to live first. Luna sat quietly for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. David could see her thinking, weighing hope against the fear of disappointment. What's the catch? She asked finally. No catch. But you have to want it, Luna. You have to be ready to take this step. Luna thought about the past 4 months of her life. Sleeping in alleys and shelters, standing in line for meals, carrying everything she owned in a backpack. She thought about the torn photograph of her students that she still carried everywhere. She thought about the teaching degree she had been so close to finishing. I want it, she said, her voice stronger than David had heard it in months. I want to try. The next week moved like a whirlwind. David helped Luna navigate the paperwork for the transitional housing program. The interview was intense. They wanted to make sure she was committed to rebuilding her life and wouldn't waste the opportunity. Why should we choose you? The program director asked. Luna took a deep breath. Because I know what it's like to lose everything, she said. And I know how much this chance means. I won't take it for granted. 3 days later, she got the call. She had been accepted. David met Luna at the housing office on the day she got her keys. It was a small studio apartment in a converted building. Nothing luxurious, but it had a bed, a tiny kitchen, and most importantly, a door that locked and an address that was hers. Luna stood in the middle of the empty space, holding her small backpack, and started to cry. "Hey," David said gently. "What's wrong?" "I never thought I'd have a home again," Luna whispered through her tears. "I thought I'd lost that forever." David felt his own eyes well up. "This is just the beginning, Luna. You're going to build something beautiful here." The library interview was scheduled for the following Monday. David took Luna shopping at a thrift store to find interview clothes. A simple black skirt, a white blouse, and low-heeled shoes that actually fit her feet. It wasn't expensive, but Luna looked professional and confident. "I'm nervous," Luna admitted as they sat in David's car outside the library on the morning of her interview. "That's normal," David said. "But remember, Mrs. Chen already wants to hire you. This is just a formality." The interview lasted 30 minutes. Mrs. Chen asked about Luna's experience, her goals, and her availability. When Luna mentioned her background in education, Mrs. Chen's eyes lit up. "We've been wanting to expand our literacy programs for adults," Mrs. Chen said. "Someone with your teaching background could be very valuable here." Luna walked out of the library with a job. 20 hours a week starting the following Monday, helping patrons find books, maintaining the computer lab, and assisting with literacy programs. That evening, David brought Chinese takeout to Luna's new apartment to celebrate. They sat on the floor since Luna didn't have furniture yet, eating with plastic forks and talking about her plans. "I want to finish my teaching degree," Luna said. "Maybe I can take one class at a time in the evenings." "That's a great goal," David agreed. "What else do you want?" Luna looked around her small apartment, at the bed with sheets David had helped her pick out, at the little kitchen where she could make her own meals, at the window that looked out onto a tree-lined street. "I want to help other people," she said. "People like me who feel like they've lost everything. I want to show them that it's possible to come back from this." David smiled. "I think that's exactly what you'll do." Over the next few months, Luna threw herself into her new life. She was never late for work, never missed a shift, and quickly became Mrs. Chen's most reliable employee. She helped elderly patrons learn to use computers, read stories to children during the library's weekly story time, and assisted adults who were learning to read. Her favorite time was Thursday evenings when she led a literacy class for adults. Many of her students were people she recognized from the soup kitchen and shelters, people who, like her, were trying to rebuild their lives. "Reading opens doors," she would tell them, "and all of us deserve to walk through those doors." David came to visit Luna's apartment regularly, always calling first, always respectful of her space. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes just company. They would sit at the small table she had bought secondhand and talk about their days, their dreams, their fears. "You saved my life," Luna told him one evening as they shared a pizza and watched the sunset through her window. "No," David replied. "You saved your own life. I just helped you remember that you were worth saving." Luna was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised them both. "I think I'm falling in love with you." David's heart stopped. He had been trying not to acknowledge his own growing feelings for Luna, afraid that his position as someone who had helped her made any romantic relationship inappropriate. "Luna," he said carefully, "I care about you so much, but I want to make sure you're saying this because it's what you really feel, not because you feel grateful or obligated." Luna looked him straight in the eyes. "David Rodriguez, I'm not a broken bird you rescued. I'm a woman who's been through hell and come out stronger, and I'm smart enough to know the difference between gratitude and love." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I love you because you see the best in people. I love you because you're kind without being condescending. I love you because when you look at me, you don't see a homeless woman or a charity case. You see me." David squeezed her hand. "I love you too, Luna. I have for months." Outside Luna's window, the city sparkled with lights, and inside her small apartment, two people who had found each other in the darkness were finally ready to step into the light together. Part 4. Setbacks and Resilience. 6 months into Luna's new life, everything seemed to be falling into place. She'd been promoted to full-time at the library, her literacy classes were growing in popularity, and she had successfully completed her first college course since returning to school. Her relationship with David was deepening. built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than dependency. Then the letter arrived. Luna found it slipped under her apartment door on a Tuesday morning in September. The official letterhead made her stomach drop before she even read the contents. The transitional housing program was ending her lease. Budget cuts meant they were closing her building and converting it back to market-rate apartments. She had 30 days to find new housing. Luna sank onto her small couch, the letter trembling in her hands. In her 18 months of stability, she had managed to save some money, but not nearly enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a market-rate apartment in the city. Her full-time library salary was decent, but housing costs had skyrocketed in the past year. When David arrived that evening for their usual dinner together, he found Luna sitting in the dark, surrounded by newspaper apartment listings and rental websites printed from the library. "What's all this?" he asked, turning on the lights. Luna handed him the letter without speaking. David read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. "This is ridiculous," he said finally. 30 days isn't enough time for anyone to find affordable housing in this market. "I've been looking all day," Luna said quietly. "Everything I can afford is either in a dangerous neighborhood or, so far, from the library that I'd spend half my salary on. Transportation." David sat down beside her and looked through the listings she had circled. The numbers told a grim story. Even the cheapest one-bedroom apartments were asking for rent that would consume 3/4 of Luna's income. "What about roommates?" David suggested. "Sharing an apartment would cut costs in half." "I looked into that too," Luna replied, holding up printouts from roommate-finding websites. "Most people want references, credit checks, proof of stable employment for at least 2 years. My history isn't exactly conventional." David felt anger rising in his chest. Not at Luna, but at a system that could let someone work full-time and still struggle to afford basic housing. He had seen this scenario play out too many times with people he tried to help. "We'll figure this out," he said, taking Luna's hand. "There has to be something." But as the days passed, their options dwindled. Luna applied for every apartment she could possibly afford, but landlords consistently chose applicants with longer employment histories and better credit scores. The few places that would consider her required deposits she couldn't manage. With 1 week left on her lease, Luna made a decision that broke David's heart. "I think I should break up with you," she said as they sat in her nearly empty apartment. She had already started packing her few belongings, unsure where she would take them. David stared at her in shock. "What are you talking about?" "I'm going to be homeless again, David. I can't drag you through this." Luna's voice was steady, but David could see the pain in her eyes. "You've already done so much for me. I won't become your burden." "Luna, you're not a burden. You're the person I love." "Love isn't enough to fix this," Luna said bitterly. "I thought I had escaped this life, but maybe some people are just meant to struggle. Maybe I was fooling myself thinking I could have something stable." David felt panic rising in his chest. He recognized this tone, this resignation. Luna was retreating into herself, building walls to protect against the pain of losing everything again. "Don't do this," he pleaded. "Don't give up on us because you're scared." "I'm not scared," Luna snapped. "I'm being realistic. In 3 days I'll be sleeping in shelters again. How is that fair to you?" That night, David barely slept. He spent hours on his laptop searching for housing options, calling contacts in social services, exploring every possible solution. By morning, he had made a decision. "Move in with me," he said when Luna answered her phone. "David, no." "Why not?" "I have a 2-bedroom apartment. You could have your own space. Pay what you can afford for rent and we could figure out the rest together." "Because that changes everything between us," Luna said. "I won't move in with you just because I need a place to live. That's not fair to either of us." David understood her point, but he also understood something else. "Luna, I'm not asking you to move in because you're homeless. I'm asking because I want to build a life with you. This situation just makes the timing more urgent." There was a long silence on the phone. "What if it doesn't work out?" Luna asked finally. "What if living together ruins what we have? Then I lose you and my home at the same time." "What if it does work out?" David countered. "What if this is exactly what we both need?" Luna's last week in transitional housing was emotionally brutal. She had to say goodbye to the space that had been her sanctuary, the place where she had learned to feel safe again. Every box she packed felt like she was dismantling the life she had worked so hard to build. The night before her lease ended, Luna sat on the floor of her empty apartment with David, eating pizza and trying not to cry. "I keep thinking about that first night you found me," she said. "I was so sure my life was over. Then things got better and I started to believe I could have a normal life. Now I feel like I'm right back where I started." "You're not," David said firmly. "Luna, look at everything you've accomplished. You have a job you love. You're back in school. You're helping other people change their lives. None of that disappears because you have to change apartments. But what if this is a pattern?" Luna's voice was small. "What if every time I get close to stability, something happens to take it away?" David set down his pizza and turned to face her fully. "Then we'll deal with whatever comes together. But Luna, you can't live your life waiting for the next disaster. You have to trust that good things can last." Luna looked around her empty apartment one more time. Then she looked at David. At this man who had seen her at her lowest point and still believed in her. Who had never tried to fix her but had simply supported her while she fixed herself. "Okay," she said. "Let's try living together. But I pay rent even if it's small. And I keep my independence." "Deal," David said, pulling her into his arms. Moving day was harder than Luna expected. As David loaded her boxes into his car, she felt like she was moving backward instead of forward. But when they arrived at his apartment, their apartment now, and David showed her the second bedroom he had cleared out for her, complete with a desk where she could study and space for her books, Luna felt something shift inside her. "This doesn't have to be permanent," David said gently. "When you're ready, when you find a place you love, you can move out. But for now, you have a home." That first night in David's apartment, Luna lay awake staring at the ceiling. She could hear David in the next room, also probably unable to sleep. They were both nervous about this new arrangement, about what it meant for their relationship. But as the weeks passed, something beautiful began to emerge. Living together felt natural in a way that surprised them both. Luna would come home from work to find David cooking dinner. David would find Luna at the kitchen table helping neighborhood kids with homework. They developed routines that felt comfortable rather than forced. One evening, 2 months after Luna moved in, she found David grading papers at the kitchen table while she worked on an assignment for her education classes. "Can I tell you something?" she said without looking up from her textbook. "Always. I used to think that needing help made me weak, that depending on someone else meant I had failed." Luna set down her pen and looked at him. "But living with you is teaching me that partnership isn't the same as dependency." David smiled. "What's the difference?" "Dependency is when one person gives and the other takes. Partnership is when both people give and both people receive." Luna gestured around the apartment. "You gave me a home when I needed one. But I've given you something too. What's that?" "Someone to share your life with. Someone who understands what it means to fight for something better." Luna's voice grew confident. "We're not together because either of us needs saving. We're together because we choose each other every day." That night, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Luna realized that home wasn't just a place with 4 walls and a door that locked. Home was the feeling of being known completely and loved anyway. Home was finding someone who saw your strength even when you couldn't see it yourself. And for the first time since her parents died, Luna felt like she was truly home. Part 5. An unexpected proposal. It was exactly 1 year since David had first found Luna behind the community center. December had returned with its familiar bite, but this time Luna wasn't facing the cold alone. She was working late at the library, staying after hours to prepare for the holiday reading program she had organized for local children. David knew her schedule by heart now. After a year of living together, they had fallen into comfortable rhythms. He would pick her up from the library on nights when she worked late, bringing her coffee and sometimes staying to help with whatever project she was working on. Tonight was different, though. Luna had been quieter than usual for the past few days, and David could sense something was troubling her. When he arrived at the library at closing time, he found her sitting alone in the children's section, surrounded by picture books and holiday decorations, but she wasn't working. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Ready to go home?" Luna looked up with eyes that seemed far away. "David, can I ask you something?" "Of course." He sat down in one of the tiny children's chairs beside her, his knees practically touching his chin. "Do you ever wonder if we're together for the right reasons?" The question came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding it in for days. David felt his heart skip. What do you mean? Luna picked up one of the picture books and held it in her lap. I mean, we met when I was at the worst point in my life. You helped me when I had nothing. Sometimes I wonder if what we have is real love or if it's just gratitude and habit. David studied her face in the soft light of the library. He could see the vulnerability there, the same fear that had lived in her eyes that first night they met. Luna, what brought this on? She sighed and set the book aside. Yesterday, Mrs. Patterson came to visit the literacy program. David recognized the name. It was his old social worker, the one who had helped him years ago. She pulled me aside afterward and asked about our relationship. She said she was worried that I might be confusing gratitude with love. David felt a flash of irritation, but he pushed it down. Mrs. Patterson meant well, but she didn't understand what he and Luna had built together. What did you tell her? I told her that I loved you, Luna said. But then I went home and started thinking. We've never really talked about the future, David. We live together, we love each other, but we've never discussed where this is going. Sometimes I feel like we're still playing house, like this isn't quite real. David reached for her hands. Luna, what we have is the most real thing in my life. But is it enough? Luna's voice was barely above a whisper. Is what we have strong enough to last? Or are we just two people who found comfort with each other during difficult times? David looked around the library, at the books that had become Luna's sanctuary, at the reading corner where she had helped so many people discover the joy of literacy, at the bulletin board covered with thank you notes from her students. This place represented everything Luna had rebuilt about her life, and now she was questioning whether any of it was solid. Luna, he said carefully, are you having doubts about us? I'm having doubts about everything, she admitted. I got a letter yesterday. I've been accepted into the graduate program at State University. Full scholarship, assistantship included. It's everything I've dreamed of since I was forced to drop out. David's heart lifted. Luna, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because the program is 3 hours away. I'd have to live on campus for 2 years. Luna's eyes filled with tears. And I don't know if what we have is strong enough to survive that kind of separation. David felt the world shift around him. He had always known Luna was destined for bigger things than their small city could offer, but he hadn't expected the choice to come so soon or feel so stark. When do you have to decide? I have to respond by January 15th. Classes start in the fall. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of this decision settling between them. David looked at Luna, really looked at her. She had grown so much in the year they'd been together. The frightened, broken woman he'd found in the alley had become confident, accomplished, radiant. She deserved every opportunity the world could offer her. You have to go, he said finally. Luna's head snapped up. What? You have to take the scholarship, Luna. This is your dream. But what about us? David stood up and began pacing between the stacks of children's books. His mind was racing, but his heart was clear. Luna, do you remember what you told me about the difference between dependency and partnership? She nodded. You said partnership is when both people give and both people receive, when both people choose each other every day. David stopped pacing and looked at her directly. If I asked you to stay and give up this opportunity, that wouldn't be partnership. That would be selfishness, and so you want me to leave? Luna's voice was small. I want you to follow your dreams, and I want to be part of your life while you do it. Luna stood up, confusion clear on her face. David, long-distance relationships are hard. Most of them don't work. Most relationships don't work, David replied. But that doesn't stop people from trying. He moved closer to her, taking her hands again. Luna, Mrs. Patterson was wrong about one thing. What we have isn't built on gratitude or habit. It's built on choice. Every day we choose each other. Every day we choose to build something together. But if I'm 3 hours away, then we'll figure it out. We'll visit on weekends. We'll call every day. We'll make it work because what we have is worth fighting for. Luna searched his face. You really believe that? I believe in us, David said. But more than that, I believe in you. Luna, you're going to change the world. You're going to help kids who feel lost and forgotten, the way you once felt. You're going to show them that it's possible to come back from anything. Tears were streaming down Luna's face now. I'm scared, David. What if I go away and we grow apart? What if distance changes everything? David pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But Luna, I'd rather love you and support your dreams than hold you back to keep you close. They held each other in the quiet library, Surrounded by thousands of stories of love and loss, adventure and homecoming. Finally, Luna pulled back to look at him. There's something else, she said. The program includes a study abroad component. I'd spend 1 semester in Finland learning about their education system. David's eyebrows rose. Finland. I know it sounds crazy. A year ago I was homeless and now I'm talking about studying in Europe. It sounds like exactly what you should be doing, David said firmly. Luna, remember that torn photograph you were carrying the night I met you? The one with all your students? Luna nodded. You held on to that picture through everything because those kids mattered to you. This graduate program, this chance to study abroad, it's all going to make you a better teacher. It's going to help you save more kids like the ones in that picture. Luna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, David, will you marry me? The question hung in the air between them. David stared at her, completely stunned. What? I said, will you marry me? Luna's voice was stronger now, more certain. Not because I'm grateful, not because I'm scared of being alone, but because I love you and I want to face the future with you. All of it. Graduate school, study abroad, whatever comes next. David felt like his heart might burst. Luna, I know it's unconventional for the woman to propose. I know we haven't talked about marriage. But sitting here talking about the future, I realized something. Luna took his hands. I don't want to just survive anymore, David. I want to live. And I want to live my life with you. David looked into her eyes and saw everything he'd fallen in love with. Her strength, her courage, her capacity for hope even in the darkest moments. Are you sure? He asked. Are you sure this is what you want, not just what feels safe? David Rodriguez, Luna said, a smile breaking across her face despite her tears. Nothing about loving you has ever felt safe. It's felt terrifying and wonderful and completely right. David dropped to one knee right there in the children's section of the library, among the picture books and tiny chairs. Luna Martinez, he said, I don't have a ring and this wasn't planned, but yes. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry you and support your dreams and love you through whatever comes next. Luna laughed and cried at the same time, pulling him up to kiss him. We're really doing this? We're really doing this, David confirmed. Graduate school, Finland, marriage, all of it. As they held each other in the quiet library, Luna realized that this was what courage felt like. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite the fear. She was choosing love, choosing dreams, choosing a future that felt impossibly bright after so much darkness. And David realized that this was what faith felt like, not knowing what the future would bring, but trusting that whatever came, they would face it together. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, but inside the library, 2 people who had found each other in the coldest moment of winter were planning for spring. Part 6, The Wedding and New Beginning, planning a wedding in 3 months while Luna finished her final semester of undergraduate coursework, and David managed his growing caseload at the community center, proved to be both stressful and joyful. They had decided to marry before Luna left for graduate school, wanting to start that new chapter of their lives as husband and wife. We don't need anything fancy, Luna insisted as they sat at their kitchen table one February evening, surrounded by wedding planning books that Mrs. Chen had enthusiastically loaned them from the library. I know, David agreed, but we should make it special. This is the only wedding we're planning to have. Luna smiled at that. Even in the midst of planning stress, the certainty in David's voice made her heart flutter. They weren't just planning a wedding, they were planning a lifetime. The guest list was small but meaningful. Mrs. Chen from the library, Mrs. Patterson, who had helped David years ago and who had since apologized for questioning their relationship, several colleagues from the community center, and a handful of Luna's students from the literacy program who had become like family to her. What about your uncle in Phoenix? David asked one evening as they addressed invitations. Luna set down her pen and looked at him. I thought about it, she said. But I realized that family isn't just about blood. The people who will be at our wedding are the ones who were there when it mattered. David nodded. He understood completely. His own guest list included no family members, just the chosen family he had built over the years through his work and friendships. The biggest challenge was finding a venue they could afford. Traditional wedding venues were far beyond their budget, and Luna was determined not to start their marriage in debt. What about the community center? Mrs. Patterson suggested during one of her visits. The main hall is beautiful when it's decorated, and I'm sure they'd let you use it for free. Luna's eyes lit up. David, that's perfect. It's where you work, where you help people every day. It feels right to start our marriage there. David loved the idea. The community center had been central to both their stories. It was where he had found his purpose, and in a way it was where their love story had begun. The morning of their wedding day, Luna woke up in the apartment she still shared with David. But this would be their last morning as unmarried partners. Tomorrow they would wake up as husband and wife, ready to face whatever came next. Luna had insisted on getting ready at the library, in the small staff room where she had spent so many hours planning programs and helping patrons. Mrs. Chen had decorated the space with flowers and had brought her own wedding dress, a simple, elegant white dress from her own marriage 40 years earlier. It's beautiful, Luna breathed as Mrs. Chen helped her into the dress. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Every bride deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day, Mrs. Chen said, adjusting the hem. And you, my dear, are radiant. Luna looked at herself in the small mirror Mrs. Chen had brought. The woman looking back at her was confident, happy, loved. It was hard to believe this was the same person who had been sleeping in alleys just 2 years ago. Mrs. Chen, Luna said quietly, thank you for taking a chance on me, for giving me that job when I had nothing. You had everything that mattered, Mrs. Chen replied. You had kindness, intelligence, and determination. The rest was just circumstances. Meanwhile, David was getting ready at the community center with his best man, Carlos, a colleague who had become one of his closest friends over the years. You nervous? Carlos asked as he helped David adjust his tie. Terrified, David admitted. Not about marrying Luna, I've never been more sure of anything, but about everything else. Her graduate program, the distance, whether I can be the husband she deserves. Man, you've been the person she needed from day one, Carlos said. That's not going to change just because you have rings now. The community center's main hall had been transformed. Volunteers from Luna's literacy program had spent the morning decorating with simple white flowers and fairy lights. Folding chairs were arranged in rows, and at the front of the room an arch made of branches and white roses created a beautiful backdrop for their ceremony. The guests began arriving at 4 o'clock. Luna watched from the library window as people filed into the community center across the street. She recognized many faces, patrons she had helped, students from her classes, colleagues who had become friends. Are you ready? Mrs. Chen asked, handing Luna a simple bouquet of white roses. Luna took a deep breath. I'm ready. The walk from the library to the community center felt like a journey through her entire life story. She passed the alley where David had first found her, the soup kitchen where they had shared so many meals, the bus stop where she had waited on countless cold nights. When she entered the community center, the small crowd rose to their feet, but Luna only had eyes for David, standing at the front of the room in his best suit, tears already streaming down his face. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They had chosen to write their own vows, and when the moment came to speak them, Luna's voice was clear and strong. David, she began. 2 years ago, I thought my story was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered, and that I would never find my way back to hope. But you saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. You saw strength where I saw weakness, potential where I saw failure, love where I saw only loneliness. She paused, looking out at the faces of their chosen family, then back at David. I'm not marrying you because you saved me. I'm marrying you because you loved me enough to let me save myself. I'm marrying you because with you I'm not just surviving, I'm living. I'm dreaming. I'm becoming the person I was always meant to be. David's vows were equally moving. Luna, you taught me that love isn't about fixing someone or being fixed. It's about choosing to grow together, to support each other's dreams even when they're scary, to build something beautiful out of whatever life gives you. He took her hands. I promise to love you through graduate school and beyond. I promise to support your dreams even when they take you far from me. I promise to be your partner in all things, your soft place to land when the world is hard, and your biggest cheerleader when you're reaching for the stars. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the small crowd erupted in cheers. David and Luna kissed as rice and flower petals rained down on them, thrown by guests who were crying and laughing at the same time. The reception was held in the same room, with tables set up around the edges and space in the middle for dancing. Mrs. Patterson had organized a potluck dinner, and the food was abundant and delicious. Homemade dishes from a dozen different cultures, reflecting the diversity of their community. Luna's favorite moment came during the toasts. Maria, one of her literacy students, stood up with shaking hands to speak. "I want to say something about Luna," Maria began in careful English. She was 62 years old and had never learned to read until she joined Luna's class. "Before I meet Luna, I think I am too old to learn. I think I am stupid because I cannot read. But Luna, she tell me that learning has no age limit. She teach me that words are doors to new worlds." Maria held up a book, a simple children's story. "Last week I read this book to my granddaughter for the first time. Because of Luna, I am not ashamed anymore. I am proud." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Luna and David found themselves alone in the decorated hall, swaying slowly to music playing softly from someone's phone. "How do you feel, Mrs. Rodriguez?" David asked, spinning her gently. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Luna replied, "even though everything is about to change." In 3 months, Luna would leave for graduate school. They would spend 2 years managing a long-distance marriage, supporting each other through phone calls and weekend visits. Luna would excel in her program, just as David knew she would, and her semester in Finland would broaden her perspective on education and social justice. But all of that was in the future. Tonight, they were simply a man and woman who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to build a life together based on love, respect, and shared dreams. As they danced in the empty community center, surrounded by the lingering scent of roses and the warmth of their chosen family's love, Luna realized that home wasn't a place at all. Home was this feeling of being known completely and loved unconditionally, of having someone who believed in your dreams even when you couldn't see them yourself. "Thank you," she whispered to David as they swayed together. "For what?" "For seeing me before I could see myself. For believing in us even when it seemed impossible." David kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you for being brave enough to let me love you. For showing me what partnership really means." Outside, the March night was cold but clear, full of stars and possibilities. Inside, 2 people who had both known what it meant to be lost had found everything they needed in each other. Their wedding day was ending, but their real adventure was just beginning. Part 7. Paying it forward, 2 years had passed since Luna left for graduate school, and she was finally coming home. Not just for a visit this time, but permanently. She had finished her master's degree in education with honors, completed her semester abroad in Finland, and most importantly, she had a job offer from the school district in their city. David waited at the airport, holding a sign that read, "Welcome home, Mrs. Rodriguez," even though he knew Luna would spot him immediately. His heart raced with nervous excitement. They had survived 2 years of long-distance marriage, but he couldn't help wondering if they had both changed too much during their time apart. When Luna emerged from the gate, David's worries evaporated instantly. She ran to him with the same bright smile that had captured his heart, and when she threw her arms around him, everything felt exactly right. "I missed you so much," she whispered against his neck. "I missed you more," he replied, spinning her around right there in the middle of the airport. The drive home was filled with chatter about Luna's final semester, her thesis project on literacy programs for at-risk youth, and her plans for her new job. But underneath the excitement, David sensed something else, a deeper purpose that had crystallized during Luna's time away. "David," Luna said as they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex, "there's something I want to talk to you about. Something I've been thinking about for months." "What's that?" Luna turned to face him in the car. "I want us to do more than just live our lives. I want us to make a difference. A real difference." David smiled. "You're already making a difference, Luna. You're going to be teaching kids who need you." "That's just the beginning," Luna said, her eyes bright with passion. "I want to create a program that addresses the whole problem. Not just education, but housing, family support, community building. I want to help families who are where we once were." Over the next few weeks, as Luna settled back into life at home and started her new job teaching 4th grade at Roosevelt Elementary, she shared more details about her vision. During her time in Finland, She had studied comprehensive support systems that addressed poverty holistically, rather than just treating its symptoms. In Helsinki, I visited a community center that provided not just education support, but also job training for parents, affordable childcare, mental health services, and transitional housing assistance, Luna explained as they walked through their old neighborhood one evening. Families could access everything they needed in one place, with caseworkers who understood their whole situation. David listened carefully. He had seen too many families fall through the cracks because they couldn't navigate multiple agencies and conflicting requirements. Luna's vision made perfect sense. What would it take to create something like that here? He asked. Funding, space, community support, and a lot of hard work, Luna replied. But David, I think we could do it. Your experience in social work, my background in education, we could build something amazing together. That night, they sat at their kitchen table with notebooks and laptops, sketching out ideas for what would eventually become the Hope Community Center. They envisioned a place where families could find not just emergency assistance, but comprehensive support to break cycles of poverty and instability. The first step was research. Luna spent her evenings and weekends visiting other programs, interviewing social workers, teachers, and community advocates. David used his professional network to understand gaps in current services and identify potential partners. Their breakthrough came when Mrs. Patterson, David's former social worker, introduced them to the Riverside Foundation, a local nonprofit focused on community development. The foundation's director, Jennifer Walsh, was immediately intrigued by their proposal. What you're describing addresses every challenge we see in our work, Jennifer told them during their first meeting. Fragmented services, families falling through cracks, children whose potential is limited by circumstances beyond their control. The Riverside Foundation offered seed funding for a pilot program, but they wanted to see evidence that David and Luna could execute their vision. This meant starting small and proving their concept worked. Let's begin with the literacy program, Luna suggested. We know that works, but let's expand it to include family services. They approached the community center where David worked, proposing to expand Luna's existing adult literacy classes into a comprehensive family literacy program. Parents could attend classes while their children participated in homework help and tutoring sessions. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within a month, they had a waiting list of families wanting to participate. Luna found herself teaching not just reading and writing, but also helping parents navigate school systems, understand their children's educational needs, and build confidence in their own abilities. David coordinated wraparound services, connecting families with housing assistance, job training programs, and mental health support. He also started a support group for parents, many of whom were dealing with trauma, financial stress, and feelings of inadequacy. One evening, about 6 months into the expanded program, Luna and David were cleaning up after a particularly busy night of classes when Maria approached them. She was the same woman who had spoken at their wedding, but now she was volunteering as a reading tutor for other adults. I want to tell you something, Maria said, her English much more confident than it had been 2 years earlier. My grandson Miguel, he was failing in school. His teacher said he might need to repeat 2nd grade. Luna and David listened intently. But since we started coming here, since I learned to read and started helping him with homework, everything changed. Miguel's teacher says he's one of her best students now. Maria's eyes filled with tears. You didn't just teach me to read. You helped me become the grandmother I wanted to be. Stories like Maria's became common. Parents who gained literacy skills were better able to support their children's education. Children who received tutoring saw their grades improve dramatically. Families who connected with support services found stable housing and employment. But the most powerful changes were often intangible. Luna and David watched as parents who had felt ashamed of their circumstances began to see themselves as capable advocates for their children. They saw teenagers who had been struggling in school discover that they were actually quite smart when given proper support. We're not just changing individual lives, Luna told David one evening as they reviewed program statistics. We're changing entire family trajectories. The success of their pilot program caught the attention of local media. A newspaper article about their work led to appearances on local television and radio shows. Suddenly, Luna and David found themselves being invited to speak at conferences and community events. "I never expected to become a public speaker," Luna admitted as they prepared for a presentation to the city council. "2 years ago, I was terrified to raise my hand in my graduate school classes." "You're a natural," David assured her. "You speak from experience and people can hear the authenticity in your voice." Luna's presentations were indeed powerful because she never hid her own story. She would begin by telling audiences about the night David found her behind the community center, about her journey from homelessness to graduate school, about the importance of seeing potential in people even when they couldn't see it in themselves. "I'm not here as an expert who studied poverty from a distance," she would say. "I'm here as someone who lived it, someone who knows what it feels like to believe you have no value, no future, no hope." The response to these presentations was always emotional. After one particularly moving speech to a group of educators, a veteran teacher approached Luna with tears in her eyes. "I've been teaching for 25 years, the teacher said, "but listening to you made me realize how many times I've given up on kids because I thought their circumstances made success impossible. You've reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place." As their program grew and gained recognition, Luna and David were offered opportunities to expand to other cities, to franchise their model, to turn their work into a consulting business. But they consistently chose to stay local, to deepen their impact in their own community rather than spreading themselves thin. "We're not trying to save the world," David explained to a reporter who asked about their decision to remain small. "We're trying to prove that every community has the resources to save itself if those resources are organized effectively." The third anniversary of Luna's return from graduate school coincided with a major milestone for their program. The Riverside Foundation announced a substantial grant that would allow them to open their own facility, a true comprehensive community center that could serve 200 families. At the celebration party, held in the same community center where they had been married, Luna and David found themselves surrounded by families whose lives had been transformed by their work. Children who had been struggling in school were now honor students. Parents who had been unemployed had found stable jobs. Families who had been living in overcrowded or unsafe housing had moved into decent apartments. But the celebration was also bittersweet. Mrs. Chen, who had been Luna's first boss and remained one of their strongest supporters. Part 8. Full circle 5 years had passed since Luna's return from graduate school, and the Hope Community Center had become a beacon of transformation in their city. What had started as an expanded literacy program now occupied a renovated warehouse downtown, complete with classrooms, a computer lab, a child care center, and offices for social workers and counselors. On this particular Monday morning in October, Luna stood in front of her favorite classroom at Roosevelt Elementary, preparing for a special visitor. Her fourth-grade students had been studying community helpers, and today they would meet someone who embodied everything Luna hoped to teach them about resilience and service. "Remember what we talked about," Luna told her students as they settled into their seats. "Our visitor today has an incredible story about overcoming challenges and helping others. I want you to listen carefully and think about questions you might want to ask." The visitor was Rebecca Chen, Mrs. Chen's daughter, who had recently moved back to the city to take over coordination of several community programs. But more importantly for today's lesson, Rebecca had grown up in foster care and had recently completed law school, specializing in advocacy for children in the system. As Rebecca shared her story with Luna's students, Luna watched their faces with the same attention she had once given to her adult literacy students. She could see which children connected most deeply with the message that difficult circumstances didn't define your future. These were the kids she made sure to speak with individually, the ones she quietly connected with additional support services. After Rebecca's presentation, Luna walked her to the school's front office. "Thank you for doing this," Luna said. "It means so much to hear from someone who's walked a difficult path and found success." "Thank you for inviting me," Rebecca replied. "Your students asked incredibly thoughtful questions. You're clearly an amazing teacher," Luna smiled. "I had a good example to follow. Your mother changed my life when she gave me my first job at the library. She always said you were one of the most dedicated people she'd ever worked with," Rebecca said. She used to tell me that watching you rebuild your life gave her hope for every person facing impossible odds. That afternoon, Luna drove to the Hope Community Center for her weekly coordination meeting with David. The center buzzed with activity. Parents attending GED classes, children in after-school programs, families meeting with social workers, volunteers preparing dinner for the community meal program. Luna found David in his office, reviewing applications for their newest program, transitional housing units for families moving out of homelessness. They had converted the top floor of their building into small apartments, creating a bridge between shelter living and independent housing. "How many applications this week?" Luna asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. 15 families, David replied, running his hand through his hair. "We only have space for 3. It breaks my heart every time we have to put people on the waiting list." "I know," Luna said softly. "But remember what you always tell me, we can't help everyone, but we can help someone. And every family we serve successfully creates space for the next family." They reviewed the applications together, a process that never got easier. Each file represented real people, children sleeping in cars, parents working multiple jobs but unable to afford rent, families one crisis away from losing everything. "Look at this one," David said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Single mother, 2 kids ages 6 and 9. She's been working as a hotel housekeeper but got injured on the job. Workers' compensation isn't enough to cover rent." Luna read through the application, her heart aching for this family's situation. "The kids attend Jefferson Elementary. That's where I used to work as a teaching assistant." "Really? I wonder if I know them." Luna studied the children's names on the application. "David, I think I do know them. The 9-year-old Alex, I remember him from when I was there. He was in kindergarten then, such a bright kid but already showing signs of stress at home." David leaned back in his chair. "It's a small world." "It's a reminder," Luna corrected. "A reminder that the kids I worked with 5 years ago are still out there, still facing challenges. Some of them probably need exactly what we're offering here." That evening, Luna and David walked through their old neighborhood on their way to volunteer at the downtown soup kitchen. It had become their weekly tradition. No matter how busy they were with the community center, they always returned to serve dinner at the place where their relationship had deepened over shared meals and quiet conversations. The soup kitchen had changed very little in the 5 years since Luna had been a regular patron. The same volunteers ladled food into the same mismatched bowls, and many of the same faces appeared in line each week. But now Luna and David stood on the other side of the serving counter, offering not just food but hope. "Luna," called out a familiar voice. They looked up to see Maria approaching with a young man Luna didn't recognize. "Maria, how wonderful to see you," Luna said, coming around the counter to embrace her former student. "I want you to meet my grandson Roberto," Maria said proudly. "He just started college, first person in our family to go to university." Roberto shook hands with both Luna and David. "My grandmother has told me so much about you both. She says you saved our family." "Your grandmother saved herself," Luna replied. "We just provided some tools." "That's not how she tells it," Roberto said with a smile. "She says you taught her that learning has no age limit. Because of that, she was able to help me with school, and now I'm studying to become a teacher." Luna felt tears spring to her eyes. This was what she and David had dreamed of when they started their work. Not just immediate help, but transformation that rippled through generations. After the soup kitchen service ended, Luna and David walked home under a sky full of stars. The October air was crisp, reminding Luna of that first night David had found her. But now, instead of being cold and alone, she was warm and loved, walking hand in hand with her husband through a neighborhood where they had both found their purpose. "David," Luna said, as they passed the alley behind the old community center, "do you ever think about what our lives would look like if we had taken different paths?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I had taken that job offer in Denver last year? What if you had accepted the position with the State Department of Social Services? We could have had bigger titles, more money, maybe a house in the suburbs." David stopped walking and turned to face her. "Do you regret staying here?" Luna looked around at the neighborhood that had witnessed their entire love story. The alley where they first met, the community center where they were married, the buildings where they had both lived and worked and grown. "No," she said firmly. "This is exactly where we belong. This work, this community, this life we've built together, it's everything I never dared to dream about when I was sleeping in doorways." David pulled her close. You know what I think about sometimes? What? I think about all the people we haven't met yet. All the families who will come through our programs in the next 5 years, the next 10 years. All the children who are going to grow up believing in themselves because of the work we're doing. Luna leaned against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I think about the teachers Roberto is going to inspire when he gets his own classroom. I think about the children Maria is going to read to, now that she has that confidence. I think about how love multiplies when you give it away. They walked the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, both lost in thoughts about the journey that had brought them to this moment. When they reached their apartment building, the same building where Luna had lived during her transitional housing, they climbed the stairs to the unit they now called home. Their apartment was simple but filled with meaning. The walls were covered with photos from their wedding, certificates from community recognition awards, and artwork made by children from their programs. The bookshelves were packed with education textbooks, social work manuals, and novels in both English and Spanish that Luna used for her literacy classes. On Luna's desk sat the torn photograph she had carried, with her on that first night, the picture of her, with her students from Jefferson Elementary. Beside it was a newer photo taken just last month, showing Luna with her current 4th grade class at Roosevelt Elementary. Look how far we've all come, Luna murmured, touching the edge of the old photograph. David joined her at the desk, putting his arm around her waist. You know what I love most about that picture? What? It reminds me that even in your darkest moment you held on to hope. You kept that picture because those kids mattered to you, because you believed your work with them had value. That's who you've always been, Luna. Someone who sees the best in people even when they can't see it in themselves. Luna turned in his arms to face him. We've been good for each other, haven't we? We've been everything for each other, David replied. Partners, best friends, teammates in this work we do. Do you think Mrs. Patterson was right to worry about us in the beginning? Luna asked. Do you think there was a danger that I was just confusing gratitude with love? David considered the question seriously. I think Mrs. Patterson was doing her job.